So, Star Wars Celebration 2023 has just been on, and I was watching one of the interviews with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, and some of the things they said caught my ear, and it was something that really, really annoyed me. I'm going to play some clips of it here. It's an interview they did with IGN, and basically Dave Filoni is going on about how he thinks you should be able to enjoy one series without watching another. So this is what he said.
I want to create a situation where you feel like you have to have seen these things because then you're missing out. Like, I don't know how fans feel, but like, do you have to have seen Clone Wars to understand Ahsoka? No, you don't have to have seen it.
And now, I listened to that and I thought, you hypocritical bastard. You're saying one thing and then you've done a complete opposite. You and Jon Favreau, and this is more Jon Favreau than Dave Filoni, I think, with the case of The Mandalorian, whereby you made it impossible to watch Mandalorian Season 3 without having watched the Book of Boba Fett. So it's completely opposite to what you've just said. Now, John looks really awkward while Dave's talking about that, I think presumably because he knows what's happened with The Mandalorian being in the Book of Boba Fett. And an interviewer asks Jon Favreau directly about this, about what happened in the Book of Boba Fett, the Mandalorian being in the Book of Boba Fett. Now it's IGN, so they're softball questions. This is like, she's not pressing him for stuff. She's actually asking if you're going to do it again. And this is what John had to say.
And Grogu make their big reunion in that show. So that was kind of a bold move at the time. Do you think, in hindsight, do you think that's something you might do more of?
I think it was a very particular set of circumstances there where we were not on the air for 2 years. And that amount of time we wanted that amount of time to pass in the show, basically, give or take. And you also had the central dynamic of the show with those two characters, and that either of them alone were not going to be fulfilled. And so we got to play that out as a chapter in that book, and then we're able to come back into a dynamic where they could be rejoined together, which would allow for the storytelling. I don't know how I would have been able to tell stories without those characters, having separate storylines for the two of them over a long time, showing both of them were not flourishing, that they were both in this imbalanced state. Because although it's interesting to watch the two of them alone, you definitely got the sense that they weren't doing as well as they could have been, that they were not, that this was not their destiny. And
so he completely sidesteps the question and starts waffling garbage about flowers and things flowering and characters working together, and basically telling us about the Mandalorian and Grogu are one and the same, really, and they can't be separated, or their stories are so intertwined. Which we all know. This is nonsense. Star Wars is dead. Like this new Star Wars Star Wars universe that they're trying to create it's just garbage now. Honestly, they're talking about bringing back Rey. Like, there's no offense to Daisy Ridley here, but Rey was one of the worst characters in 3 of the worst movies. They just have no clue anymore. I mean, they just have no clue anymore. Star Wars is, and always will be, one of the greatest franchises of all time. But it doesn't mean that they can't ruin it. There's a lot of stuff to Star Wars. A lot of stuff. There's a huge... They got rid of the expanded universe just before the movies came out. The sequel movies came out. They basically said, none of that is canon anymore. So there was a slap to the hardcore Star Wars fans, I should say, who had consumed and loved all that extended universe stuff. That was just washed, hand waved away. And they said, we'll bring in cherry picking, bits and bobs from that we like, that will fit the story. But these guys just, no one seems to have a plan or a clue. Everyone wants to be like Marvel, but no one has the Marvel plan. They're just throwing crap out there because they think it's good. Listen to them talk about basically how they're just basically experimenting with The Mandalorian.
So much more room to experiment too with new filmmakers, because Dave had never done live action before,
Never.
and look at the learning curve so quickly from having that collaborative environment, doing a few episodes here, also writing, me learning to write from him for Star Wars, and then you could try something different for an episode, because if it fits within the context of the whole season, you
So they're taking this season 3 and are just using it as a playground for new ideas and for playground for new directors to do whatever they feel. There's no cohesive plan at all. And they're now expecting us to believe that they've got a cohesive plan for new movies, like TV series, and Dave Filoni's getting his first ever feature film. Is going to be the culmination of the Mando verse, if you want to call it, which is like Boba Fett, Ashoka, Mandalorian, and those characters. There's going to be a big movie that ties up all those characters. When and where it's set, who knows if it's set before the sequel films, or maybe even during the sequel or after the sequel films. If it's set prior to the sequel films, that would make sense. Obviously, that's the date, that's the sort of time frame that the Mandalorian is set in, so it could be interesting. Like the Mandalorian and those characters are super interesting, which is why I still watch the Mandalorian, even though it's season 3 is kind of like hot garbage. But I think these guys have just been smelling their own farts for too long, and they're getting away with murder. They've been given a license and a playground to do whatever the fuck they want, and they just don't seem to care anymore. Like they're just doing whatever they think might be cool, or anything they think they would like. And there's no cohesion, there's no plan for Star Wars anymore, and that just makes me sad, because I really like Star Wars, and to see it shitting itself prior to death, because the Star Wars universe is dead. Like, it's dead. They keep trying to revive it, but it's dead. It's shot itself on the surgery table, and you keep shocking its heart back to life for one more movie or one more feature. Then you see a glimpse of hope of life in The Mandalorian, and you think, oh, okay, this could be good. And then even that they manage to squash and kill. So I have no hope and I have no faith in any of these people to deliver on Star Wars. But that was just a quick 5-minute rant about it, because that interview really pissed me off, because they can't even see their own hypocrisy now, and it's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. They want to do this combined universe, but they have no idea how to do it. They just have no idea how to do it. They're going to be too interconnected, and they're going to be experimenting with things that they want to test out to see what works for when they go on to better projects. Jon Favreau was even talking about Game of Thrones as an example, and that's exactly what it is. So he doesn't just talk about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
that we've inherited. I mean, I learned a lot, like Game of Thrones. It would be so,
Yeah.
because they had so many storylines, you know,
Yeah.
and so you would kind of.
And that's exactly what's happening with Star Wars. Game of Thrones, season 1 to 3, amazing, like brilliant. Seasons 4 and 5 starts to go down. There's some peaks and troughs, and then the rest is just a big steaming pile of dog shit. And that's kind of what's happening with Star Wars. It's turning into this season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones. And to hear him go on about the previously ons is just a joke, because the previously ons on The Mandalorian season 3 are just criminally bad. They're just random scenes of garbage that have no connection to the episode at all. Listen to this.
You know, you want. It also creates an expectation around it. Like you start to anticipate, oh, who is this? What is this? And then sometimes it fulfills it. Sometimes it just goes a whole completely different direction.
Right, maybe I'm being too hard on them. Maybe the plan will work. Maybe it'll all be great. Maybe the films will link in with the stories fantastically. Everything will work out for the best, and you won't have to have watched 7 seasons of the Clone Wars or Rebels or other things to enjoy these new pieces of media. But I'm just not hopeful. If you agree with me, disagree with me, think I've gotten it all wrong, you know, by all means let me know below. If not, again, let me know if you feel the same. Let me know how you're feeling about the Star Wars and the future of Star Wars. Until the next episode of The Mandalorian and the next Ashoka, I'll see you later.